Hey, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hi. It's my privilege today. So first of all, I want to start by thanking Jeff for his introduction and thanking Jeff for us still being able to work with the African American Leadership Program here. I'm very pleased with that. Also, I want to thank Mark Gessner for inviting Gina and highlighting our program. And also the university, because it's an opportunity for the university to expose you to kind of the work that we do and what we're doing, and hopefully you'll learn some things today about leadership. So, let me say, first of all, it's an honor for me to introduce such a powerful and mission-driven leader to kick off the series, because there's a whole series on this, but Gina is the first one. Now, there are often people who talk about being mission-driven, and some of them are, but I always say, look at where you put your time and where you put your treasure, which is your money. And it will tell you what's important to you. Okay, I want you to go and do that. Look at where you spend your time, look at where you spend your money, that'll tell you what's really important. Sometimes mine is food, I notice that. Between cooking and shopping at Costco and Cole and pick and save. So, okay, that's another thing. So, but for Gina Green Harris, you don't have to go any further than her titles to understand what her mission is and where she spends her time and her treasure. I kiddingly tell her all the time that anyone with 3 titles is either extremely important or maybe a little bit crazy. Gina Green Harris is, you ready for this one? Interim Director, University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Medicine and Public Health. She's also Director of Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute, Milwaukee Outreach Programs and Services. And she's also Director of Milwaukee Life Course Initiative for Healthy Families, Regional Program Officer. Now she carries all those titles. Now that doesn't tell you that's a busy woman? Yes. So she is what I would call the epitome of a mission-driven leader. A powerful woman who has made differences in all of these areas. So she not only holds the title, but she actually makes a difference. While initially she was housed in Madison, she has now created the offices here in southeastern Wisconsin and Milwaukee County to address the population where they are. And one of the things they said is her motto is, meet the people where they are and stay in your own lane. That's it. That's the best way to be successful. What she has done has increased the women of color and families receiving early diagnosis of dementia. She's increased the level of education for female caregivers and has empowered our community about that whole silent, really, disease, dementia. And she has really brought that to the African American community. Since joining the Institute, she was actually instrumental in creating the Institute's Wisconsin Registry for Alzheimer's Prevention, which focuses on minorities, and the registry has increased its numbers by double since she's been part of the program. Now, in her spare time, Gina serves the community by being on boards, committees, and using her expertise to inform and grow the community. She really will volunteer if you need her to come speak, to talk about Alzheimer's, talk about dementia. She is a community person that's willing to do that. She's also a sought-after speaker who motivates and guides through her strong spiritual presence. She's a licensed minister and holds a master's degree in business administration, MBA, and a bachelor's of science in psychology. In addition to all this, she is an alum of our African American Leadership Program, where she strengthened her leadership and helped to guide others in her cohort to leadership growth. So even though she was part of the cohort, she was continually helping other people to grow. So Gina is a friend of mine. She is a mentee, and one that I admire, and that I learn from, and one that I continue to grow with. So our speaker tonight, Gina Green Harris.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mitchell, for the wonderful introduction, and to highlight that Gina's our first speaker in this transition we have here at Stritch. We, for the last couple of years, had a speaker series called Business Leaders with a Conscience, and we really wanted to open it up to to address all the different ways that people are leading and serving in our community. And people have been through programs and degree programs and the African American Leadership Program and others. And so it's a real honor. Gina has spent the day with us. We're working her hard, speaking with students and alumni and faculty and university leadership. And I think to what Dr. Mitchell said, just inspiring in many ways and being able to connect with lots of different audiences. So thank you very much for being here.
So thank you for having me. It's been my honor and privilege to be, first of all, asked. So I want to thank Dr. Mitchell and, of course, Ms. Margaret Armory for inviting me and actually suggesting my name. And so I want to thank you, Mark, for actually saying yes. And so to all the powers that be in the room, I want to say I am humbled by this experience and by this offer. And I am extremely grateful to be here. Quite frankly, as we have our conversation, I hope to share some of my information and knowledge with you so that we can go out and continue to serve the community. Can I make one correction to Dr. Mitchell's introduction? Because I'd like my dean not to think I'm the interim dean of the student medicine and public health. I am actually the interim director of a new office that is created inside of the School of Medicine and Public Health called the Office of Community Engagement for Milwaukee. So I want to make that correction on camera so that I am not overstepped my bounds. I want to be clear about that. But yes, I want to make that.
Thanks. So as you were mentioning, for those who haven't been here before, I just want to tell you a little bit of how we'll approach the next 45 minutes or so. I have some questions to start the conversation off, for us to have a conversation. So welcome to our living room here, and then to open it up to all of you. So to give you a little bit of a sense of our guest, and then for you to ask questions for the second half. So to start things off, if you could tell us a little bit about your career path, and if there's a particular turning point or piece to share about you.
Sure. So where do I start? Actually, I think I'll start with how I became who I am, because I think that'll be a really great segment into some of the other conversation that we have. So I often share and talk about my journey as a young girl. So I grew up, I was born on Friday, October 13th, left-handed in 1967. And so, and I came out of the womb talking. And so they're like, So my mom always asked, when are you going to not talk? But so my journey is one that talks about having to overcome obstacles from day one. But I understand that, quite frankly, I was designed for this purpose. And so as I was entering school as a loquacious left-handed little girl, who most folks thought I owed a day to the devil because of my birthday, I had struggles and often met with the cloakroom on a regular basis because I talked a lot. And so my mom had to go to school for me quite frequently and encourage my teachers in a very nice and advocacy kind of way to stop chastising me because I was writing with my left hand. And so I had learned early on what it felt like to be an underdog. I didn't necessarily understand it at the time, but I was also learning advocacy. And so as my mom would talk to my teachers about not disenfranchising me and making sure that I was treated with respect and dignity, my grandmother was at home encouraging me that I was destined for greatness. My grandmother was initially, as she raised her children, a janitor for Milwaukee County inside of the daycare center. And as she began to raise her children as a janitor, it was her growth that she actually went back to school after her kids graduated and got her undergraduate degree and her bachelor's degree in education and became one of the first school teachers and directors of the daycare center that opened in Milwaukee. And so that is the beginning of my legacy. And what she taught me was to be who I was and that my talking had a purpose. My grandmother unfortunately passed when I was 16. And my grandmother was my absolute best advocate and friend. And what I promised her as she was dying was that I would be the person that I needed to be to make a change in the lives of people. And so my career path has been nothing except working towards change for people and making sure that people who don't have a voice actually have someone in the room to stand up and to talk for them. So that has been my start of my career path.
You know, you began to, I think, answer this next question in a way, but as Dr. Mitchell said, this is our mission-driven leader series. And if you could talk a little bit more about your own mission and how that's shaped personal and professional direction.
Absolutely. So my mission is to serve and to be a good example of understanding people, of integrity, of love, and really leading for your purpose. So whenever I take a mission or job, I don't think of my job as just the 9 to 5. I think of it as what's the underlying purpose for me? Why was I led to this? I don't just take a job, I'm led to positions. And I also believe that in my position, I have an obligation to serve. And so when I began my career path, and if you know, my career path has always had a stream where I've always been in a role where I've been serving or helping people. So before I even take a position, it has to come to me and it has to bear with my soul and my spirit that it is the path that I need to take. So keeping my mission is to make sure that every day of my life, believe it or not, when I go home tonight, I'll ask myself this question: have I changed? Have I impacted? Have I really met someone where they are to make a difference in their journey? And that's my path.
And part of what you talked about there is how you've been changed and impacted as well as impacting others. And I know part of that path was here through the African American Leadership Program that Dr. Mitchell leads with Margaret. So could you talk a little bit about the impact of that program on you and what you see as the purpose there?
Oh, absolutely. The AALP actually, and I shared this and I always share this, took me back to my roots of going to a black college. And quite frankly, it reminded me that family and purpose is important. And when we began, as I began AALP, it put me back in the frame of mind that quite frankly, I can be who I really am. I need to be true to myself and my authentic self, and I need to lead that way as well. And so the program actually continued to give me, and actually helped me build my confidence, well, again, to be the leader that I was called to be. It forced me to move from a place of complacency to a place of urgency. The fact is, our community is dying. We have health disparities. We have chronic health disease. We have all of these violence issues in our community, and somebody has to do it. And if not me, who? And if not us, who and when? And that's what AARP really helped me to recognize that I am designed for a purpose, and I need to get on my job. How's that? And so, I was, you're approving of that one? And so that was really a reinvigorating moment for me in my journey.
So clearly you're as far away from complacency as I think one can get. And part of that, in spreading the word of your work, you had quite the success. I don't know how many of you read the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and might have seen our guest of honor on the front page, in a front page story, getting the word out. Could you talk more specifically about the words you're getting out about the work you do with dementia and Alzheimer's?
Absolutely. So the Alzheimer's Institute began our journey in Milwaukee in 2008. We actually began our journey at a time in Milwaukee where Alzheimer's disease in the African American community was quite frankly not being discussed. We knew it was here, we knew that there were some issues, but the community had not embraced the ideal or the concept that this is something we need to be talking about. And so when we began our program, quite frankly, there were no dementia care specialists like my good friend in the audience. And we began to actually trailblaze that, because what we did is we designed a program that was specific to African American families. We have a person on our staff who would go into the homes, who would talk to families, and really develop a work plan of how to help them as they take their journey. The other thing we did is we focused on getting families to get a diagnosis, because we know that without early detection or without a diagnosis, the caregiver burden of a person caring for someone's Alzheimer's is incredibly large and detrimental to their own health. So when we began our program, we knew there was a basis that we had to start from, but quite frankly, we had to meet the community where they were. So we went into the community and asked them, what do they really want to hear? How do we serve you? And what we heard is a concept that, first of all, we need to make sure you're staying in place. That's the first thing. The second thing we heard was, help us to get past some of these other chronic illnesses, and then we'll be ready to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia. And that's exactly what we did. And as we built that program, what we learned was we needed to go upstream to actually start talking about how do we build real programs that the community can engage in. So aside from doing workshops, we have now built a dementia course for folks who are living with dementia and their caregivers that they can go and sing, and the purpose is to reduce caregiver burden stress, and as well as to give that person living with dementia something of a positive experience. Again, we really wanted to develop our program so that it was user-friendly to the community and that it could be long-served. The other piece we did is we built partnerships. We have a strong partnership with the Department on Aging, the Alzheimer's Association, and all of the other aging entities. But we realized we had a lane. I'm about staying in my lane. Our lane was to get folks diagnosed, and then our other lane was to connect them with the agencies to do the long-term end of life or whatever sustainability that needed to happen to keep those folks in the community safe. So our partnerships were crucial to us. And so we built that, and that's what you see as a result.
You know, earlier on when we were talking to the Dean of our College of Nursing and Health Sciences and some of the faculty, you talked about an approach called asset-based community development, which is a personal interest of mine too. Could you explain a little bit more of what that means and how you go about doing it?
Absolutely. So asset-based community development is just that. You go into the community and you find out what are the strengths that are already current in the community. So oftentimes we come in with this shiny knight armor. I'm bringing you all these great programs and I'm gonna change everything. But what we fail to do is recognize that the community is an asset and has strengths. So with ABCD, because we like acronyms at the UW, and I know you do too. So with ABCD, what we do is we go in and we identify stakeholders, we identify key leaders, we identify everyday Joe Blow folks who are instrumental in that community, and we begin to help them build on their current strengths. And what my motto is around that is, if we build it, they will come. But if the community builds it, they will come, they will stay, and they will be accountable. And they will actually embrace this process. And so as we began to build, that's exactly how we did it.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to, just a couple more questions and I'm going to open it up. I want to, if you could, since we have a lot of business students in the audience, put on your MBA hat, and you've said a couple of times today that what's been important is making the business case along with the education and community engagement. So help us understand, what do you mean by that? What making the business case around what your work is?
So absolutely. Quite frankly, we know that in our community, health disparities is real, right? So we have multiple morbidities, which means that we have high health care costs, which means that, quite frankly, we need access to better care and better treatment. If we as institutions fail to have cultural inclusion and culturally competent programs and culturally sensitive programs and opportunities, we will have high healthcare costs even more. Meaning that if we don't take a look at how we're doing business, the folks in whom we have to serve, which will also be brown in the next 5, 10 years, as you know, based on the data census, you're going to actually begin to see some higher healthcare costs, which may bankrupt your systems. And so what we have to do is be willing to acknowledge that caring for a person with dementia who's African American, there are some core care competencies around that, but then you have to understand there's some cultural competency care things around that. So it may be understanding that business-wise, you may have to look at the time that you're allowing, and I know this is a big one, your physicians to spend with that family, because it's not just that patient you're caring for, it's the family that you're also caring for. Because as an African American woman, I go to the doctor with my mom, and my sister goes, and everybody else goes. And so the physician is not answering 1 or 2 questions, but 10, 20 questions. And so they have to be prepared for that and not be offended when the family is asking about the health care issues that we're facing. So I think the business case around it is saying, how do we want to make sure that as we expect these financial costs to continue to rise, how do we develop a plan that is culturally tailored so that we know we're actually going to, one, keep these people in the community longer, which actually will reduce health costs, right? But 2, that we have a staff that is trained to actually address these issues in a culturally competent manner so that we don't lose patients and they go to healthcare systems that do. And then I think those are 2 things. And I think the other big thing is that so that we can have a healthy community, right? And then we can have a healthy community, then we certainly can reduce some of those costs overall.
Thanks. So one more question, switching gears a little bit, but building before, in a conversation we had earlier, you talked about cultural competency and also intentionality about people to hire and impact the culture of different organizations. So you hire people, and when you're doing that, and you're looking to hire the right people for your organization, so one of my favorite questions, in addition to a stretch degree or association with a strict program, what else do you look for when you're hiring?
Well, those are 2 very key items. Sure. So I actually, and this is a really good question because we often think that most folks are looking at what's on your resume, right? And your resume is very important, but what I look for in a potential hiring is what's your level of commitment to the job that you're applying for? You know, what's your level of commitment to working with people who don't look like you? And then how do you express yourself when you're in mixed company? How comfortable are you in the position that you're applying for as well? So it's not necessarily just about bringing me a master's degree in public health. It's helping me understand what you really think public health means. Public health can mean different things to different people. And so it's really making sure, and then the other question I always ask people is, what's your mission? What's your mission? And when you come into this office, what are you leaving behind? What do you think that when you walk through those doors, can you show up and be present? Because quite frankly, there's a lot of us who go to work and we're absent while present, right? And in this field, you can't do that. And then I also look at people who have had experience working with families and actually come into our office and say to the effect that I want to work with this community. I look for people who have a desire, a hunger, and a thirst to actually serve people. That is really important to me.
If you're not the right first person for mission-driven leadership, I don't know. So why don't we open it up? All right, we're good with standing up, and we'll go down.
If I fall, I'll come back.
So I'll come out, if you have questions, just to speak into this, both for the room and also we record it so other students and members of the community can watch. So who has a question? Where would like to start?
I guess I have a question.
Great. If you could, when you ask a question, I'm sorry to interrupt, if you could just say your name and if you're in a program. You do that.
My name's Ava King. I guess currently I work in the corporate world, so I do have a passion of helping and working with people. What do you think would be what would be the best advice to start getting into, like working with people and family? Because a one of the struggles that I find when I apply for those jobs is you have to have that experience, and I don't, so.
Sure. So that's a really good question. Quite frankly, what's your level of volunteerism? What I might encourage you to do is, if you don't work with people directly on your job, in terms of aside from customer service or aside from that professional corporate kind of thing, I would encourage you to actually do some volunteer work. So maybe looking at ways to do community service with, for instance, some of the shelters, with some of the pantries, or just getting your feet wet. Because I have to be very honest with you, many of us think we want to do this work, but when you get into the meat of this work, because it's long hours, I work every Saturday, I work past 5 on a regular basis, my staff and I go into homes, we connect with other organizations that go into homes. So I would encourage you to volunteer in some of those settings and get your feet wet to make sure that's really the jump you want to take. And if it's in your heart, and make sure you follow that passion. And award yourself if that's really what you want to do by saying, I volunteered, where can I go next? And I want to start look at jobs that actually, some of the jobs if you're looking at like with health insurance agencies right now, they're doing a lot of community work and trying to get folks registered and trying to get folks into their healthcare systems. That may be a route for you to go because it's taking your business and putting it into community work. And they want your work from a corporate standpoint. So you might want to look at doing some of those types of positions as well. And if you also maybe looking at retail experiences, because that too has some customer service to it, and that will get you in the door as well. And I can actually answer that question because what my daughter's doing right now, believe it or not. Yes. Another question? I was told I have to stand. So am I standing in the right space, young man? Okay. All right. My attention deficit is not liking this, but I'm gonna deal with it. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Murray. I currently attend Marquette University, but I'm applying to graduate school here. So I want to say thank you. You're such an inspiration. And I do have a question. So what I've noticed so far is that there's a stigma associated with mental illness. So instead of talking about it, we're ignoring it. We're ignoring obvious symptoms. So how do you suggest that we create the dialogue or the trust in order to start the conversation?
That's a really good question, young lady, and congratulations on your graduate school. So what we do is, quite frankly, when we started our program, people didn't want to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia because of the very reason, because it was thought as a mental illness. So what we did is we said, well, what do you want to talk about? And so we started talking about the other illnesses that are impacting in our community. So we talked about cardiovascular disease, we talked about diabetes, and so on and so forth. But what we did is we started connecting the dots, and we started helping people understand that, oh, if I have diabetes, I'm at higher risk for Alzheimer's disease. And they still didn't want to call it Alzheimer's or dementia. They wanted to talk about brain health. Can you tell me how to have a healthy brain? Because, and I'm just being real and honest. In the Black community, the one thing we don't want to lose is our what? Our mind. Not our brain, our mind. We can lose our brain as long as we keep our mind, but we want to keep our mind. Right? And so what we had to begin to do was have the discussion around dementia. It does not mean you losing your mind. What dementia is a brain disorder, disease, right? And so we had to talk about it from the disease perspective, and we had to show and educate around the plaques and the tangles and how this actually does impact the community. Now the other piece about it is that we had to start talking about depression because it's real, and our caregivers were actually suffering from chronic depression. And so how do we do that? I have to be very honest with you. A lot of that came through humor. It came through saying that it's okay to have some meltdowns. It's okay to understand that, yes, you're not going to be 100% all the time. And we had to start talking about it in the context that just because I have depression or just because I have mental illness, it is not mine to own, right? Part of the problem with the community, especially in the Black community, one of the things that I talk about often is that how we date our diseases, right? My sugar, my arthritis, right? We talk about it like that. And so I have to get folks to the point of saying we need to stop owning it. It is diabetes. It It is arthritis. It is not yours. Don't take it home with you, and have dinner with it. It is something that you have to understand for sure and treat. And let's talk about it from that way. And so as we begin to do that and have those honest, open discussions, and I think the important thing is to do it in a safe place, right? Where you're not judging and where you're allowing for people to say what they need to say and then having solutions for them. That's the other thing. Because a lot of us think that if I've got depression, I can't get rid of it. Well, you can, and let's talk about how to do that. I'm gonna end on that note. Next question. Is there another question? And did I answer your question fairly? Okay. I got 2 minutes per question. I just want to put that out there. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Hey. Being a minister and being in the area of the work that you do, how do you incorporate your ministry on the days where you need a lift? Because it is exhausting work.
Oh, that's a really good question. And I have to be very honest, and my staff tells me all the time, I walk down the hall at work going like, oh, Lord, I thank you. Ooh, thank you, Lord. And I say the little prayers out loud, and I don't even know I'm saying them, quite honestly. So my spirituality and my faith, actually, I go in my office when there's some real struggles, and I just have a conversation with God, and I just talk about it, and then after 5 minutes, I'm coming back out, and I'm facing the world, because I believe by faith it's already worked out. It does, there are times when we have death, right, because we're doing Alzheimer's. There are times when things that we thought were going to happen didn't happen, or families didn't show up, and we know they needed to show up. And so we have those struggles. But I have to say this, my entire team is faith-based. And we come together, and I love my job because it's the only place I can go to and pray in public, and all of our work is based in the faith community. So we get to pray and be uplifted by what we do see. So yeah, I think I pray unconsciously, and then I look at, and I also have to say, this is the other piece. I know that I'm still on the mission. I know that I'm going to, it's just a moment in time. So this is my takeaway on that one, because this is what I tell my staff. It's a moment in time. It's not the entire day. You're not having a bad day, you're having a bad moment. And take it as for what it is, it's got to pass. And so that has been my philosophy around that as well. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Susanna, and it's kind of backtracking on a previous question. I have a little bit of experience in the community as well, volunteering time, but do you have any specific organizations that we should look into to spend time volunteering with? Can you give us any leads on any of them maybe?
So it depends on what you want to do. If you want to volunteer around Alzheimer's, there's the Alzheimer's Association. If you want to volunteer, there's a list of actually community volunteer opportunities online, and I would encourage you to Google them. There are organizations, the UW, you can volunteer for UW opportunities. There are many places that you can look online and to see who might be accepting volunteers at this time. I know that there's a group, and I cannot think of the name right off the top of my head, but I can certainly, if I get your information, I can get that to you. I'm more than happy to email you some lists. And so, yeah. But I know we Google them, but I do know depending on what you want to do may make a difference. There's the women's shelter, there's the rescue mission, there's all kind of places you can volunteer. There is the guest house, they take volunteers, the Joy House. I know, I said I was going to send the list, didn't I? I'm sorry, I'm still talking. That's attention deficit disorder, but I can certainly get you some information on even other places. Did you have something specific in mind too?
No, I was just kind of, just in general.
Okay, yeah.
I know there's a couple different websites that I visit.
Yeah, so you can call. I know the Joy House is always looking. So if you're looking for seniors, St. Anne's is always looking for volunteers. And again, the Rescue Mission is looking for volunteers. You can go to St. Benedict's and volunteer. There are many places in the community that are hoping to have people like you who would like to give some of their time. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Renita McAllister. My mother passed away from dementia, and personally, myself, I just wish this kind of information was present or more open, or somewhere where it was more given before she had passed. And I'd like to know, how does the word get out? Where is this type of information given to people who may be going through some of the things that my family went through, to understand what the dementia means and what it is, and how they can get more help, and where can they get the help from?
Those were a lot of questions,
I know.
but I'm gonna try, but that's a good
There's a
question.
lot of things that we missed out
Yes,
on. that
exactly.
You're offering today,
Yeah.
that a lot of people, the word was out there, I wish you would have known.
And first of all, let me say I'm sorry for your loss. And I understand the journey is probably still tough, right? Even though it has concluded. Quite frankly, we hear that all the time. If only I had known prior to death or prior to placing. I did not know. So what we've been trying to do is be more publicly aware, so doing awareness campaigns. We have also been going, we go to all the health fairs, we go to church fairs. We have been very intentional about getting this message out. We partner with our agencies, and my good friend here, Bashir from the Department of Aging, we have a relationship where we go in the homes together and we tell about everything that's happening as we connect with other agencies, and we try to make sure that we're doing cold calls if we need to. We call our research participants and tell them about programs that's going on. We make sure that we try to be in every visible space that we can. One of the big things that we actually have done, 2 years ago, I believe it is now, 2 years ago, we started a breakfast dialogue called Breaking the Silence, Addressing Dementia in Communities of Color. And quite frankly, we started it in April, which is Minority Health Month. We were absolutely amazed that we had, at our first one, we were only expecting, I said, well, I told my team, I said about 100, so we had 250, 300 people in the room. People of African American and Latino descent. I mean, folks from the community. This was not about professionals. This is not a dialogue about professionals. It's about helping family caregivers and folks living with dementia understand what they're going through. And so we've been doing that for the last couple of years. Our new one is coming up on April 21st this year. It will be at the Italian Community Center, and we're expecting over 500 people. And so we know that there's a need. And our goal is to meet those needs as best as we can. How do you get resources? We encourage you, I can give you my information, but I certainly encourage you to look at the Alzheimer's Association website, look at the Milwaukee County Department on Aging's website, look at Interfaith's website shortly, look at, I'm just kidding, that's on tape. Oh, anyway. Look at all of those folks who are in aging and actually start connecting the dots. What we did that was unique about our program, quite frankly, is that we crossed diseases. We didn't just focus on Alzheimer's. We talk about heart disease, we talk about kidneys, we talk about lung disease, as it all is relative to Alzheimer's and dementia. And so we crossed those disease continuum, which had not been done before. So we began to build those relationships right along with our partners in aging. And so as a result, we're now creating programs that go upstream. So we're doing programs around diabetes prevention. We're doing programs with wise women around taking off pounds sensibly, the TOPS program. We have begun, because we want to talk about prevention and intervention, right? We want to help our community stave off Alzheimer's disease as best we can. So that's pretty much has been our role. But certainly there are ways in which we're trying to get this information out. But the more, it's just it's so sparse because our community has kept it secret in our families for so long. We try to hold on and do it ourselves. I gotta handle this. No, you don't. There's help out here for you. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh, he's gonna bring the microphone.
Hi, I'm Chris. I go to Pius 11 High School. I was just wondering, do you face any backlash because from the community because you're so face to face?
Oh, that's a good question. So that's a good question. Do I face backlash? Actually, I don't. I don't know that I can say I do. I think what happens is, depending on the audience, right? So because I'm really focused in the African American community, and most of us are faith-based, and I have to say, I don't go out proselytizing, so I'm not trying to say, I don't talk about winning souls and all that kind of stuff. But what I do know is most folks talk about faith. And so I really talk about faith in the context of where it should be. I know where my faith lies, but I know as a community, that is usually our foundation. So the community actually will embrace that and actually has found that to be very enlightening and very helpful, because it gives us permission to actually allow ourselves to have faith as we make this journey. Now let me be clear, it does not excuse us from actually taking steps and measures to do the right thing. So we can't pray our poor meal away. We just can't do that, okay? But we certainly can use our faith as we go through our journey. So for instance, I did a presentation on faith and going through the Alzheimer's journey. 85% of the people who make it as a caregiver say they pray. They say they have faith. And so we actually build our workshops around that. And so it's been actually well received in all communities. And quite frankly, it goes across just African Americans to just the community in general. And so we have been successful in that. So I haven't had much backlash. I can't say I have.
I have one more question. I just want to follow up to what you were saying before. You talked about preventative work, and so a lot of us have parents or grandparents who, I think their biggest fear, I'll speak for myself, I think my mother's biggest fear is that this may happen to her.
Sure.
So can you kind of bring it home in that way? What is some of the preventative things that you educate about?
Absolutely. So I can give you some information around some behaviors that we might be able to look at in terms of lifestyle and dementia. But I have to be clear, I cannot guarantee you won't get Alzheimer's disease. But we do know that having exercise, daily routine exercise, 30 minutes is important. We know a healthy diet is important, where we're making sure we're having our fish, we're making sure we're having vegetables, Mediterranean diet type of things. Now I have to be clear when I talk to my brothers and sisters, a fish diet is not Catfish Friday, okay? I just need to lay that out. Yeah, all y'all know that it is not the cod fish fry. No, that's not what we're talking about here. That's not the kind of fish. But we are talking about healthy diets. We're talking about making sure that we're doing some things to actually challenge our brains. Cognitive challenge for the brain is important because what we do is build cognitive reserve. And again, when we begin to have healthier lifestyles, just getting enough rest is really important. Making sure that we keep our physician visits and do what we know to do to be physically fit is important. I'm not saying that you have to be a size 2 or a size 12 even. I'm saying you have to be a healthy body weight though, and you have to know what that means. And then if you have diabetes, it needs to be controlled. The studies show that folks who have diabetes and cardiovascular disease actually increase their risk of getting a form of dementia. So we have to make sure that if we have something to that magnitude, that we're taking care of it. And as far as the fear of getting it because a parent has it, quite frankly, Alzheimer's disease can skip generations. It doesn't mean because mom had it or dad had it, I will get it. It can skip. Now, trust me, yes, the truth is that you have a higher prevalence of folks who have had family history with Alzheimer's disease, but the number one risk factor for Alzheimer's is age, right? We know that. And so if we keep living, we may put ourselves at risk. But the research also shows that if we improve our diet, if we lose our weight, if we make sure we're doing the right things, we can actually set or stave off Alzheimer's disease, even if it's present in the brain. So we have to make sure that we're doing what we can do as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks. Did we have time for one more question you wanted to say?
My name is Bernie, and I got a question on your stay in the lane philosophy. Coming from the corporate world, I've seen how that philosophy kind of demotivates people who want to help and extend themselves. How does it work for you, and what do you do to turn that around?
Sure. So staying in your lane is not meant to be a punitive kind of thing. And I understand in corporate, it's kind of like, hey, do what you're supposed to do. But my stay in the lane means, where's my area of expertise as an organization? What do we do well? What is our niche? And we do that. And we do it to the best of our ability. And even as an individual, as a boss, as just Gina, I know where my strengths are. I stay in that lane. And sometimes I might want to help, but then I do an intersection to the person who can actually help me help. I make sure that even if I'm going to try to offer assistance to somebody, I have somebody at the table who really is the expert. And oftentimes what we try to do when we get out of our lane is be the expert. That's not what we're supposed to be. What we're supposed to do is, so I know that, someone has, for instance, I'm not a physician, so I don't do diagnosing of dementia and Alzheimer's, but I do know how to get you to that physician. And when we get in there, I don't do the cognitive testing because that's not my lane either, but I also know how to connect you with the right folks who do that. So that's what I mean by staying in our lane. And what that does is it builds credibility. And it also builds respect, because people like it when you can tell them the truth about who you are and what your limitations are. And people also appreciate when you say, I don't know anything about that. That's not my lane, right? I don't have a clue about that. And so even at corporate, I think if you rise to the status where you're doing excellence in your lane, then it's comfortable, and you should be comfortable enough to say, even in your excellence, that this is just not for me. I need to have you help me do this. And I know, I'm not incorporated. Trust me, I've never been there, and because I probably wouldn't have. Anyway, and so, but the reality is that for us, it has worked as an organization. It has kept partners at the table. It has allowed partners to trust us. It has built faith in us. It has built credibility for our programs. It has done quite a bit. And for me, what it does is it allows me to go home at night and sleep. It gives me rest and peace, because I know I've done the best I could with the gifts that I have and the time that I have to use them. So I think that's a good way to actually stay in your lane.
Business partner at Baird. So please come back. You don't have to have school that night. Community members are always welcome. So thanks again very much to our special guest. Thanks, Dr. Nichols.